Welcome back to Dave's Gone By on this Saturday morning, and we have not a can-do spirit this morning, but a kin-do spirit. And I apologize already for that horrible pun and lead in to my guest, but there's so many different ways to introduce this particular guest that I figured a pun was really the safest one. I mean, I could talk about his being a rock and roller for many years now, a novelist, an author, and also a long-time radio host, which is also one of the main reasons I would love to talk to this man. He is Greg Kihn, and he is in the Daverhood with us. Hello, Greg Kihn.
Good morning and hello. This is wonderful because, those horrible puns just never stop. They just keep coming. It's almost as if I was cursed at birth.
Wait a minute, so you make them all the time? You have to if you do a radio show.
Oh, yeah. Almost everything becomes a pun. The whole thing started by accident. We called the first album Greg Kihn.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, well, what do you want to call the second one? So we said, well, how about Greg Kihn again?
Mm-hmm.
And the third one was next of Kihn.
Oh,
At
that's
that
good.
point, we created a monster.
Oh, my gosh. And when you still release music, now do you have to rack your brains for another one?
You're not going to believe this, but it just goes on forever. The new one's called Complete. But,
right.
We've had Consolidation, Continued, Conspiracy, Contagious.
Well, that's good.
It goes on, and I don't think we'll ever run out.
Well, since you mentioned Complete, that is also one of the other reasons that we're here. This is a very recently released compilation box set, 3 CDs of Greg Kihn music. Whose idea was it to really do a summing up, even though you're certainly not stopped? I mean, it's a career retrospective. One assumes the career is going forward, but who decided to take stock and really put out like a monster box?
Well, that's an interesting question. My manager had mentioned to me that we had all of this great stuff in the can. He said, for instance, we had live shows going back to the Joe Satriani era. We had studio stuff going, from every era. And he said, it just seems a shame to sit on this stuff. Most of it, 90% of it had been out of print.
Mm-hmm.
And, well, let's start looking at it. So we went into a friend of mine's studio
Mm-hmm.
and just started listening to all the tapes, and it blew me out how much great music we had in the can. So I just said, well, we've got to put this out. There's no question about it. Not only is it of historical significance, for instance, the Joe Satriani stuff and things that he had done, but I just wanted to put out a retrospective that showed things from the early, middle, and late period Greg Kihn band, because we've had so many great guitar players. My son Rye.
Rye Kihn.
Rye Kihn, yes.
That almost sounds like a pun. It isn't, but it sounds like it could be. I don't know.
Well, he was named actually originally after Ry Cooder, one of my favorite guitarists.
Uh-huh.
But and Rye, by the way, is a graduate jazz guitar major from Cal Arts.
Ooh.
And he spent a year or two at Berklee School of Music in Boston. So the kid is well schooled, and he can play the hell out of that guitar. But he is just the latest of a long line of spectacular guitar players that we've had in the band. And like I said, it included Joe Satriani. And, just the Satriani fans alone would love to get their hands on. I have an entire... So we got 2 CDs
Mm-hmm.
of studio material and 1 live. And we're also going to throw in a DVD of all the videos. The entire canon of Greg Kihn band videos.
So I was going to ask about this. This is not just a download thing. It's a physical CD box set. Because you always have to ask nowadays, Yeah.
The actual physical one doesn't come down the pike, I think, for another month or so.
Mm-hmm.
But the beauty of the download, like, for instance, my career
Mm-hmm.
kind of spans recorded music. I know that's kind of a crazy thing to say, but, we made vinyl records.
Oh, I see,
Now
yeah.
we've come full circle, and we're putting out records that were originally recorded analog and pressed on vinyl in a digital downloaded format, which I got to tell you, playing this back in the studio, I was shocked at how good the old analog tapes sounded. And when we digitized everything, it just sparkled. I mean, I was blown away. It sounds as good today as it did the day we recorded it.
Well, there will be the audiophiles to this day who say that music lost a little something just in warmth and sound when it jumped from analog records to the CD era. I mean, I don't have those ears to hear it. I'd rather have, play a CD 500 times and not have it ever skip than
right.
and lose a teensy bit of warmth. I don't miss, I guess, the warmth. I wouldn't know it if I heard it. Maybe I would. Again, you don't feel that. I mean, or are you getting it from those old records?
It really is an improvement in my case because it was never available in that digital format. So the high end and the definition and just this general syllabus of the tracks is much higher, I think, in digital. And when you go and you listen to some of those studio stuff, it sounds as good as it did in the studio.
And I think you even dusted off some of those old cylinders you did back in the Edison booth.
Yes. Watson, come here. Yes, I go back to the early Paleozoic era.
I figured.
And it's interesting because now, at this point in my life, I'm legacy building, okay? I'm a grandfather.
Oh, my gosh.
Son, yes, he's 2 years old. My daughter, who is a nurse, by the way, had a beautiful grandson. So I just came from there, as a matter of fact. And, of course, my son plays in the band. And someday, I'd like to stick around for another 15 or 20 years. I think we may have 3 generations of Kihns playing in the band. And wouldn't that be a trip?
Well, how old are you now?
I am 61.
Yeah, well, you got time, man.
Oh, yeah.
So,
And, the warranty hasn't run out on some of the parts here.
Well, it's good to know.
Things still work. I can't believe that I'm this old because I've been doing radio now for 14 years. When I first started, I thought, okay, this will last a year or two. And now an entire generation of people have grown up listening to me on the radio, and that was the generation after the generation that discovered me as a rock and roll artist. We went out and toured our butts off for about 15 years straight. We opened for everybody and did our own tours.
Uh-huh.
But we really cut our teeth on the road. Staying home and doing radio where you've got to get up at 4 in the morning every day, it's a whole different animal, man. And I really enjoy not having to travel. That's wonderful.
Well, you still do make the music a bit, but it would be sort of like you'll go for a weekend somewhere,
right.
do a concert.
We have a gig this Saturday at the B.R. Cohen Winery up here in beautiful Napa, California. And it's a big benefit with us, the Doobie Brothers,
Whoa, yeah.
Leonard Skinner, Joe Satriani, and Sammy Hagar, and and Leon Russell.
Whoa, cool.
So it's like a meeting of the tribes. I'm really looking forward to it, and that's this Saturday. So we play. I don't like to go to the airport. How about that? Any place that we can get to in a day is okay.
Well, let me ask, since you did about a decade and a half of rock and roll life, in semi-indie, but also pop star kind of rock and roll life. I mean, did you do the rock star thing? Did you go berserk on berserk?
Oh, yeah,
drugs and sex and all that kind of thing?
I did everything.
Whoa, good for you. Well, not the drugs.
Looking back, one can extrapolate, maybe I should have taken it easy, but yeah, during the Jeopardy era, I'd say 1981 to 1983, when we were on MTV all the time, we were constantly on the road.
Okay.
I mean, we didn't stop for, we would get off one tour and get right on another. So yeah, absolutely, I was whacked out of my gourd.
Well, why is that?
% of the time.
Why is that such a necessary component? Why can't you just be like a salesman who goes on the road? Or well, I'm sure salesmen do what they do, but...
Well, I don't know. That's a good question. All I can tell you is, you put a 25-year-old guy on the road with a #1 record, he is just going to have some fun. Will find him. Looking back, I had my thrills, and it's nice now. I kind of look back on it. I wonder what we were so crazy about. Life. I should have smelled the roses.
You're at the stage now where you not only have children but grandchildren, so you must have been married for a while. At what point did you settle down? During the radio show when that started?
Well, this is my third marriage.
Oh, God, yeah.
And the kids are from my first marriage, where I married my high school sweetheart way back in the early Paleozoic era, because I'm doing a little mental math here.
Sure.
Those kids from my first marriage are now grown up. My daughter, as I said, already has a grandson. I have a grandson. So, yeah, it was during that first marriage that I was out there running around being Joe Rockstar. It wasn't good to raise kids, but somehow the kids raised themselves and they were fabulous. And now my son, who pretty much grew up on stage, he was with me 90% of the time, so he knew all the songs. He'd been to 1 million gigs by the time he was like 16 or 17. He'd seen the band 1 million times, and he knew all the guys, and he was just, it was like a family affair.
But wait a minute, once you had a son who was growing up, especially into his teens, was that a cue for you? My kid's here, I can't X, Y, and Z, or were you...
Yeah. I had to clean up my act.
Right, okay.
Certainly did, yes. And you know what? I'm kind of glad I did, because, you only get so much lead time with that, and I had to go through all kinds of hell. Normally, they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. Well, you can if you hit him over the head with a frying pan, which is basically, every time I learned a lesson, it was the old frying pan in the skull.
Okay, well, was there a turning point moment? Was there a moment when you did your last line of whatever it was on a tape?
Yeah, there kind of was. It was the end of the last tour that we had done with Honey, and...
I'm sorry, with who? There's somebody trying to...
Satriani. We'd just gotten off the road. The current record that we had out had flopped. It was we just signed with EMI, and it was our second EMI release. And then we find out that EMI is releasing the band, and I'm getting divorced. Joe Satriani quit the band for his solo career. I really felt like a redheaded stepchild there, and it could have been the end. Many guys would have given up at that point, but I figured, what the hell? So I started my writing career right around that time.
Oh, yeah.
And I slid right on into radio. So there really was no, like if we were doing a Behind the Music on VH1,
right.
It wouldn't have a bad ending, because yes, I had a big valley and a big dip where where I was doing everything wrong, and then somehow I think everybody comes up with their own moment, and it just came to me. It's time to move on, and it was it coincided with starting to write novels, because I'd always been a writer. I'd always been a writer who wrote songs in 3-minute formats. But to write a novel, that took a year. And then to go out and actually get a literary agent, a New York lit agent, and then to actually have that literary agent go out and make a multi-book deal and actually put the books out, that was phenomenal. I think the odds of that may have been greater than the odds of having a hit record.
Wow. Well, can I ask, in writing that very first novel, I guess you kind of knew you had a full-length book, fictional book in you. Did you have, because I fancy myself something of a writer myself, although I can't imagine tackling a novel. Did you have the story first, the outline first, or did you just start with chapter 1, blank page? How did you go with that first one?
Good question. Because a lot of people ask me this. Everybody wants to write a I really liked the short story, and I thought, I'm going to develop this into a novel. So that short story really became the first chapter, and the whole novel was a flashback from that, and then it comes full circle at the end.
Oh.
But it was one step, it was one thing in front of another. I did it very logically, and it wasn't that hard. I'll tell you the truth. I had. I knew in my mind what I wanted to do, but I was naive enough to just kind of let the thing happen. And, at the time I was being edited by a professional editor at Tor Books. So it was kind of like getting a PhD in fiction writing at the same time because, I would literally write this stuff, send it off. 2 weeks later I'd get the same chapter back, red pencil, and I'd see, oh my God, I got to bone up here. But it was so much fun to do. Writing is very therapeutic, and I really enjoyed just the act of writing every day. Now, it did take a year and probably another half a year to edit the thing and get it ready for publication.
Sure.
But, once I was rolling, man, I was like a machine. I banged out 4 in a row, and they were all sequels to each other, and the story just kept going. In fact, the story does keep going. And now that I'm doing screenwriting, I'm taking a lot of the ideas that I had from my novels and making them into viable movie scripts.
Now, can I ask, in that process, you have still quite a level of celebrity. You have some serious success as a novelist. Has that given you a path to, getting the screenplays made, or at least into development deals, or are you going on faith? Is it kind of like, how does it,
question, because it's happening right now. And my agent, I got an agent in Hollywood that does, movie scripts. And I had written a thing called 45 RPM, which was the mafia in the music business back in the 60s. I mean, it's kind of like The Sopranos with guitars. It was really cool. And I wrote the whole series, and she loved it, and we had contacted a couple of different, networks about developing it, and they were all into it. And I went down there about 2 months ago, and I met with Fox, and I met with Paramount, I met with ABC, and I met with 2 or 3 independent production companies. And then everybody liked the idea, but then one by one, I was getting these callbacks like, well, we're going to pass because it's a period piece. Nobody wanted to touch. I already did that. Nobody wanted to touch a period piece because it was in the 60s. Why? Well, because Playboy and what was the other? There are 2 shows.
Pan Am and the Playboy Club, or Playboy Bunny,
Pan Am,
right.
And it was like, okay, the jury's out. If these shows are hits, everybody's going to want more 60 shows. If these shows are not hits, nobody wants to touch
our
period piece.
Our network executives...
I should have said it now, but that's the way it is.
I mean, are network executives really that scared and stupid still? Do they really wait for the bandwagon and then jump on it? Nobody decides to hook up their own... I mean, it still astonishes me that nothing has changed in all that. It's like, not the script is good. Sorry?
Yeah, it's a wasteland, man. I'm telling you, you'd be shocked at how small the thinking is. But you know what? On the plus side,
What?
I do have, as you said, I do have the first door open. So, like, if I have my agent call up so-and-so at Fox, and I want to pitch an idea, I'll get an appointment, whereas probably the average guy couldn't get an appointment. But, I got to tell you, you only get a couple of shots, and your ideas all have to be great. Now, this was a great idea, but it lost on a technicality that it was a period piece. Now, it may turn out that in the next 6 months, they want to do another 60 show.
Right.
A Mad Men, for instance, just won an Emmy. So that kind of reverberates through the industry. You go, oh, gee, that's a 60 show, and they just won an Emmy. Wow, maybe we ought to do one of those. Harry, what do you think? Yeah, well, let's call Greg Kihn. I really like that script. Everybody loved the script, by the way. It was a neat story.
But let me ask you this then. How do you...
Hey, look, that's TV. That's a whole different... I'm trying to develop movie scripts at the same time, and that takes years, and it's kind of like trying to dock the Queen Mary with dental floss.
How do you keep from getting discouraged? How do you go to all these meetings with people who say you're fabulous and they're licking your butt clean, and then you know in a month either the phone ain't gonna ring or the phone will ring and say, "Oh, we loved it, but we're passing." I mean, how do you just not take a baseball bat to something?
Your disappointment only lasts for a short while. If you're a creative guy like I am, I'm always on to the next idea. You know, and I'm already on to my next idea, and I'm already developing the next idea. So as soon as one thing passes, I mean, I just got an email from my agent just like 5 minutes ago, right before we spoke.
Mm-hmm.
And she said, so-and-so really likes the script, and they want to talk to you further about it. So I don't know if that's good, bad, indifferent, but it's still alive, and it may get done or it may not get done, depending to the whims of the TV industry. Now, on the other hand, developing movies is a whole different ball of wax. I mean, that takes years. And
have you done any producing of film, or you haven't gone into that?
No, I never have. But Horror Show was my first novel, and about 2 years ago, what was that guy's name, honey?
I beg your pardon?
Corbin Burns. I'm asking my wife.
Oh!
My wife is smiling and saying, "Hello. Hi, sweetie."
Hello.
Corbin Burnson, who's kind of a friend of mine.
From L.A. Law, right? And
he wanted to, he was on L.A. Law.
Right, a bunch of things, yeah.
And he wanted to direct horror shows. And he's got a production company. So we started working on that. Then he quickly got buried doing Psych, which they shoot up in Vancouver, British Columbia. So I only get, he comes back for like a couple of months. We got to squeeze everything in. So that hasn't moved along too briskly, but, it may still, all of these things are forever percolating. Visualize it this way. You're a fisherman, and you've got like 8 lines in the water, and you got the bobbers out there, and you're just, you're sitting there by the side of the stream, just having a good old time, and then you get a bite on this line, and you reel it in, and you get a bite on that line. It's kind of like that.
Well, that makes, it's kind of the equivalent of what my dad has always said about keeping many irons in the fire. You never know when the cow's going to come along, the right one for the brand. Got to keep them in there.
And one of the bits of advice that I give the young writers is that you have to keep moving forward. You have to have 10 ideas. You can't just have one and live and die by that one idea.
And
it's very important that you keep moving forward and you don't be discouraged, because let's face it, you're gonna strike out here and there.
Or especially when you're starting out, you mostly strike out. You're lucky you get a hit, and
but you have to learn from those lessons. You have to move forward. It's all part of the creative process.
Now, can I ask, before we run out of time to even talk about it, 2 different things. We haven't talked that much about your music, and we haven't talked that much about how you got into radio.
Yeah, that was a trip, yes.
Well, did you just luck into your gig? Because I think you've been with the same station. Right? It isn't like you bounced and bounced.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I was filling in for somebody that was on vacation for a week doing 7 to midnight. Over the years, I had been on the radio a million times. I'd done a gazillion interviews over the years. Just part of being a musician in the 70s and 80s is you did a ton of radio interviews. So over time, I got really comfortable on the radio. So a friend of mine said, "Hey, you fill in for this guy who's on vacation." And I did the week. I really enjoyed it. I love talking about music, and I am a big ham, and I love to talk.
Right.
So, and they said, "Hey, we really like that. Would you like a job? Would you like to do this 7 to midnight?" And I thought, why not? I don't have to travel now. It coincided with the publication of my first novel around 1996. It was perfect. So I was staying
is your show syndicated?
We did syndicate it for a couple of years. I just ended the syndication last February because I'll tell you the truth, it was too many hats. It was just one too many things for me to do.
I mean, I was going to also get into the fact of how radio has changed even in the past 15 years in the competition from satellite and all that. I mean, have you noticed a sea change working in terrestrial radio when you just go into your room and it kind of is still the same as it was 30 years ago?
No, I do feel that change, and I feel as if the entire medium is moving forward. And, you know, you always look ahead. Like, where is it all going to lead to? Everything is computerized. That's one major change in radio. Mm-hmm. Editing is now a matter of software. So, you know, but I'll tell you the truth. In a way, the technology has changed and probably will continue to develop and evolve. But the basic concept of radio has not changed. Content is king. If you have good content, if you say something that's interesting or you have a good story or somehow you can communicate, I think there'll always be a job for you in radio, no matter how convoluted it gets. People still want to hear somebody speak. They want to hear a good story. Some people just have that gift. They open their mouth, they tell you a story about something that happened at dinner last night, and it's fascinating. The next guy says the same story, and it's not fascinating.
I don't know what that is, but it's absolutely true. I mean, you look at, I think, the Regis Philbin's resurrection over these past 20 years.
Good example.
Regis will just start talking about something, and you don't want the guest to go on there, and you don't need the whole rest of the show. It's like, oh, these 5 minutes are Regis's time, and that I could listen to. It's that kind of thing, you know? So I agree. And your show, which I assume people can listen to not just locally, but all on the Internet. When is your show? How can people hear it?
Well, I'm on 5 to 10 a.m. Monday through Friday on KFOX in San Francisco. Mm-hmm. Of course, that you can hear that streaming on kfox.com. If you Google Greg Kihn, you'll get 1.5 million results. I mean, it's pretty scary. But there's lots of ways to listen, and I would say go to gregkihn.com would be a good place to start. You can download music there. You can listen to archived radio podcasts. You can hear that day's show from KFOX. There's 65 ways to do this. But you know, I tell you the truth, man. I get up in the morning, I go in there, and I talk, and I come home. I still don't know what I do. I mean, they'll say, well, what is it that you do, Greg? I don't know, but I'm pretty sure I'm the only one doing it. I just don't know what it is.
As long as you can't describe it, you can probably do it for another 30, 40 years.
I'm hoping.
And I assume you also, if it's a 5-hour shift, you got music that you play. Is it the classic rock that the station plays?
Absolutely, yes. We are a classic rock station, so I'll play a couple of tunes and we'll stop. And I do interviews.
Oh, cool.
I interview a lot of musicians, and I do talk about the music, and we'll have some comedians on, and it's a lot of fun, man. Check it out at kfox.com.
kfox.com, and of course, gregkihn.com, where you can get Kihnplete as well, the CD and now DVD box set of all this material from Greg Kihn, whom I have like 1 or 2 more minutes with, and therefore I do have to ask about playing the hits that you still do when you go, still playing the concerts that you do. When you have to play a song like Jeopardy, does it ever get like, oh, I've got to play that for the fans? Or is it always like, oh, wow, I get to play that song again? I like that song.
No, I did go through a period where it was kind of like going to the dentist. Oh, no, that song again. But, in the last 2 years, my attitude has changed, and now I really look forward to it. I know what a kick the audience gets when we do one of our hits, like if we do the breakup song or Jeopardy, and it gives me a kick knowing that they're enjoying it. So my attitude has kind of come full circle now. I look forward to doing the hits. A lot of people get bored doing it. I'm not like that. I feel like it's a privilege, and it's a bit of a historical document. I love doing it.
Is there a favorite song of yours that you wrote?
Yeah, the breakup song is my favorite song, And I end every show with it, and it also gives my son Rye a big fat solo at the end.
And, well, is that why it's your favorite song, or was it when you wrote it you kind of knew?
You know, when I wrote that song, I wrote it in 15 minutes, and I just knew. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it. It wrote itself, and that's an earmark of a song that usually is pretty good. It writes itself. Took about 15 minutes. It just popped right out of my head, and it's been my favorite for the last 20 years. I suppose it'll always be my favorite.
Cool. Well, hey, unless you write a bunch more favorites, I mean that's the thing.
There you go.
Your favorite thing is always the next thing that you're going to write.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Well, Greg Kihn, it has been a really favorable thing to talk with you, and I'm going to bring this conversation full circle by trying to squeeze one last pun out of it. You mentioned that, in fact, you are, since you're on the radio and you do what you do, kind of a ham, and you do play with your son. Does that mean at one point you will do a duet album with him called Ham and Rye?
Oh, that's fabulous.
Thank you.
We will definitely have to do that. That's great.
Well, thank you. It's been great talking to you. Greg Kihn. Everybody, go to gregkihn.com, and thank you so much. And best of luck with everything.
And I've had a blast. That was a great interview. Thanks again.
Have a great day. Thank you.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.